Welcome back to the Rugby Rundown with Jan de Koning and myself. And I just explained to Jan why I lost or missed out on last week's episode, because I had my Blue Hands episode, infamous Blue Hands episode. So sorry, Jan. But anyway, yeah, we're back today again.
Great stuff. Thanks to have me, and awesome to be back.
But of course, we lost the game on Saturday, and yesterday Rassie had a very, I would say, open press conference, sort of taking a mea culpa approach. It's my fault. He accepted responsibility for it. First and foremost, how much do you read into that? The fact that Rassie is now taking it on his own shoulders. Is it all his fault? Was it partly his fault, or was he just, trying to deflect blame from his players?
Partly, definitely deflecting blame from his players, but that's a Rassie way of doing it. He doesn't throw his players under the bus, even though there were some players that needed to be thrown under the bus. But part of that is wrong selections, incorrect selections. We saw the bench, and as talented as Zachary Porton is, and as talented as Jan Hendrik is, they didn't bring that calmness that were required. And Jan Hendrik doesn't mean he's a bad player. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a great player. He could be one of the greats of the game in years to come. But I think Jan Hendrik needs to calm himself down. He seems to be, I don't want to say he gets wild, but he has those hot flushes where he seems to lose his composure. And I think in that was the game where you needed composure. You needed to calm everybody down. Porton just, he's still learning, but they're both youngsters, man. And that's where I think Rassie learned his lesson, and the changes he made for this second test clearly indicates that he's learned his lesson, that those players need a bit more time. Yes, I know everybody says, oh, they need caps. Like, right now you need to win the test. If you lose another test, you can't win the series. So you have to win on Saturday in Cape Town. So that's as simple as it is. He selected a team that he thinks can win this test, and that will be able to understand and maintain the pressure. There are obviously risks. He's got a 2-1-5 bench or 5-1-2 bench again. There's that risk, but I think in general, Rassie admitted that some of his selections and his decisions, the one thing he also said was that he should have sent down a message to take the penalty.
So how does that work now, that message thing? Because I was interested in that, because I also saw Dave Rennie say that they sent a message down to the referee in the game to go watch things on the loose head side. How does that work? How can they speak to the referee during the match? Is that even allowed, or how do they do it?
No, I don't think they're speaking to the referee per se. They send a message down to the players to speak to the referee. So they'll get a message to the captain to go speak to the referee. And Ardie Savea did speak about that. So those water carriers are now becoming the message carriers. Having a green light and a red light and Rassie's disco lights won't work, because this is a more specific message that you need to get on. What you need to do then is get the guy on the side with a kicking cone. And the moment the penalty is awarded, you tell that guy, now you run on. And because he is running on with a cone, they will get the message that they must kick, and the message coming from above. So, yeah, I understand what Rennie said, but when he says they get the message. So Rennie also, you got to translate. So like Rassie's English is sometimes very broken, even though he's very eloquent in it. People says, oh, but he's, because the double negative that you get in Afrikaans, it works, but and you and myself know that sometimes you think in Afrikaans, you talk in English, and that's also why we would say, I think, because you pause yourself, and Rassie then uses his Afrikaans talking in English, and that's where all those. So I think the classic situation is lost in translation. He's saying a good thing, he's making a valid point, but his language is sometimes, and is that exactly what Rennie is also doing? When he says we got the message to the referee, or we spoke to the referee, not him personally. He sent a message to the players, and the captain went and spoke to the referee.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You and I both know, both of us are actually Afrikaans speaking. Most of us on this channel are actually Afrikaans speaking. So there's a lot of translation going on in our heads as we speak, don't you think?
Yeah. No, very, very much. And I get people often tell me, I think too much. But that's an Afrikaans. It's a very, very Afrikaans thing. And I've been told that that's a way of You say, I think, because it gives you the extra half a second to
or
actually
and
translate
R's. No, we know we and R people. I try and do my best to get them out in editing, but it's not always possible because we and R a lot. But not just you and me, but all of us.
My worst is the was and worse.
Yeah. It's still confusing to this day. Yeah, I know.
My plural and my singular. So team is singular.
Yeah,
but the
team is plural. The team is plural. The players one by one are singular. I learned the team is plural.
It depends whether you're American, English, British, or South African. If you said African, it can be anything.
Yeah, who cares? As long as you understand what we're saying. No, we don't care. We've got a follower. His name is Siegfried. He knows who I'm talking to. I'm not going to give his full name. He's going to correct me in my English very soon in this comments. I'm sure he is. So how's it, Siegfried? Thank you for that, man. We appreciate it. He just breaks it down and makes it simple for me to understand.
As they say, what are you doing on Sunday? Bring your sandwiches. I'll teach you some English.
So there we go. All right, so we'll talk about the team just now. I mean, lots of 6 changes, 3 of them in injury enforced. But we'll talk about the team. Let's just talk about the game first. And there's the old famous saying, lies, and damn statistics. The Springboks won every single statistic, I suppose, except the one on the scoreboard, the one that really matters. So just give me your overall impressions of what happened on Saturday.
Well, first of all, Saturday was a Peter de Villiers game. He also, on more than one occasion, said, we won everywhere except on the scoreboard. So, yeah, it's one of those things. So 60% territory, 60% possession. But I think the most telling statistic for me, and this was mentioned by both coaches. So Dave Rennie mentioned, and I think the best way is the description he used. He said South Africa is the best team to convert 22 entries in the world. They usually score 5.5 points per 22 entry. That means we score a try every time we enter the 22. This past Saturday, it was 0.9. So that means we only scored one of our 11 entries was converted into points. And when we talk entries, it's entries into the 22. There's not a penalty that you get outside the 22. Those points don't count because it's not an entry into the 22. It's when you carry the ball into the 22 and you convert that. So that to me says everything we need to know. Yes, they ripped, and that's another thing. They were very good at the breakdown, at spoiling. Rassie keeps saying it's all legal, it's all legal. But I know he doesn't want to stand on the referee's toes. But believe me, there was a couple of forward passes which went undetected or unpunished. There was a headshot that went unpunished. I've so often heard, and this is just for clarity, I'm not complaining about the referee. I don't think we lost because of the referee. We lost because the All Blacks were better and we were terrible. It's probably our worst performance in 2 years in terms of, we're talking about 25 missed tackles and 23 turnovers. So apart from the only converting one of our 22 entries, so if you get 11 entries into the opposition 22, you should win the game. We only converted one of those. That's the first. The other statistic is, or contributing to that, is that there were 23 turnovers, which is unheard of, and 25 missed tackles. So that tells you how bad the Springboks really were. That doesn't mean the All Blacks weren't good. The All Blacks forced some of those mistakes on us. Quite a lot, I suspect, and they were very good at the breakdown and spoiling our ball at the breakdown. So, yeah, I think that's you can sum it up. I mean, there's a lot of things. You can go to the individual passes, you can go to a couple of forward passes and stuff like that. I think that we just made too many mistakes to really be in the races.
Let's talk about those turnovers first. Number one, the All Blacks slowed the game down a lot, like you said. Rassie mentioned yesterday in the press conference, and again, he didn't blame the referee or anything. What they did was legal, but they flopped on, tackled players, slowed the ball down. Couple of calls by the referee saying the ball was open, but it was still between the players' legs, and he allowed the All Blacks to compete for it. Little things like that, and it's not a question mark on the referee. Why were those turnovers so high? Let's talk about who competes in the turnovers. Paul de Villiers, Pieter Steph, Malcolm Marx, the guys that normally be involved in the ruck and like. What did they do to make us concede so many turnovers? What did you see?
So the one thing they do, and this is something I spoke about earlier, and if you go back to some of my other podcasts, after the very first All Black practice I attended, I mentioned this. When you in their 22, near their 20, they do one of two things. One guy tackles, the other guy goes to the ball. It's double tackles, but unlike double tackles to hit you back, one tackles and the other one rips the ball. Now that's the one thing there. I'll have to go back and count how many of those happened, but a number of them happened in the 22 where they ripped the ball. Knock on over the try line.
Ripped as
Again,
well.
that was a hand that was put in there. And that's just what they played. You know, they practiced that. And then the other one is pulling you over the line. I think we were held up only once or twice, but that all adds up. So you got a couple of 20 goal line restarts, a couple of knock-ons over the try line. It's ruled a knock-on, but Jordan Barrett's hand was in there and he knocked the ball out of Malcolm Marx's hand. So should that have been a knock forward? The Jordan Barrett, or does that count as a rip? And then Malcolm Marx scored afterwards. So those are things you can debate, and that doesn't mean the referee was wrong. He might well be right in that. But all those little things added up, and I think that's where the 23 turnovers came from various. Of course, there were knock-ons. I mean, Sasha, I think Sasha alone had 5 turnovers, so conceded 5 turnovers. So, you know, your key playmaker, your fly-off, the game breaker, has 5 turnovers by himself, the highest in the game. Then there's something amiss, and I think Rassie rightfully pointed out that we must look in the mirror ourselves first. And I think that goes back to your previous point. He did look in the mirror himself. He also looked into the team's mirror and made some changes. And yeah, I mean, he's still holding out hope for CR playing, and we'll probably hear later today or tomorrow whether CR is fit, and then Paul de Villiers will sit out. But yeah, I think it's a matter of go look in the mirror and fix what you can fix, and that's what the Boks will have to do and will do probably.
Rassie said in the press conference after the match, directly after the match, that the ripping thing caught them out. I spoke to a New Zealander coach called Ben Herring, who coached in Japan, worked with Tony Brown, worked with Dave Renier, who knows them, worked with Steve Hansen. And he says that's been like that for ages. That's nothing new from the All Blacks, the ripping thing. Why would it have caught the Springboks unawares, do you think? Or is it true that it caught them unawares?
Yeah, I think they were, because there was a difference in the tactics, because they played this extremely fast game, standing off the rucks and stuff. So I think what caught them unawares is that they contested everything, and they didn't just they were tactically more astute. So tactically, the All Blacks changed their approach. It's not a massive change, and you know they didn't kick everything, they didn't run, but they also didn't run everything. So I think tactically they did beat us, and that's what caught us by surprise, because they kept coming for every tackle, and there was an attempt to rip at every tackle, and they succeeded a lot. So what that means is we can't have one-up runners anymore. You're now going to have a protector, a supporter, so that the moment the guy goes to ground, the carrying player must now make sure he holds onto the ball tighter, and the support player can then get over the ball. And I think that's something that Rassie says Sia does very well. So I think it's being more clinical. I mean, you say more clinical, it's not just as simple as hold on to the ball and never let go. It's making sure that you are secure in your carries. You know, don't try and bulldoze over everything. Just secure your ball, go through the phases, and the openings and the gaps will appear.
Yeah, that's a good point. How many times did we see the Springboks, make good ground, and then when they had to put get the ball back, there was no one there. Sort of no support runners. Yeah. Sasha, that excellent kick that he made and recovered himself. And that's the one I was talking about, where the ball was actually between his legs, and the referee allowed the New Zealanders to compete for that, because it wasn't out yet, as far as I know. But anyway, that's what I'm saying. There was no support there, and it arrived late. And that's the kind of thing that you see from a team that hasn't played together that much. And that's what I'm asking my next question. How rusty were the Springboks, do you think? All this chopping and changing and new teams every week and everything else, did it play a role or not?
That could have been a contributing factor. It probably was a contributing factor. I think, to me, personally, the guys didn't look, you can see the Springboks, they look like damn zombies when they go on that field. And they seemed far too relaxed. They kind of enjoyed the haka, and they enjoyed the fact that the crowd stayed quiet, and it's a beautiful anthem, and there just wasn't that intensity that you normally see from a Springbok team against the All Blacks. yes, they had good passages, but it's almost, and people will probably slaughter me for this, but it's almost like they went through the motions because they're so good at it. They've become so accustomed to it. They just kept doing the same thing without actually solving whatever happened on the field, solved it on the field. Even after halftime, for another 10 minutes or so, the Springboks looked really good. And then from just after the 50-minute mark, things started going to pot because they lost their concentration.
Right, we conceded 5 tries and we only scored 1. And you mentioned 25 missed tackles. Now, there was a big change in that match when Kurtley Arendse got injured and Jesse was moved to the wing. Now, I know Jesse's played wing before and everything else. I suppose on paper it made sense, but it upset that 12-13 balance. That combination, that, very trusted old school Jesse and Damian. Do you think that played a role there? Never mind the missed tackles. We get to the missed tackles just now, but it upset the defensive pattern, I think. And Rassie also admitted that might have been a mistake.
Yes. So the fact that they had to bring in Andre Esterhuizen to play at centre and Jesse moved to the wing, where he has played before, but Jesse calls the defence from outside centre. It's a bit closer to the action. That's a very different position, and then having to stand a bit wider. And the other person they exposed is Grant Williams when he moved he played a lot on the wing. So Grant Williams was also exposed, but he didn't have a good game, and he's now injured, or as he says, he's injured. But yeah, so they did expose us out wide, and that would have been a contributing factor. But I think in general, our reading of those plays were, in the first half, we were a lot more secure. It's just their heads dropped. I mean, after that scrum penalty, to me, that's the changing thing. We suddenly got penalised. It's like everybody said, "Oh no!" And it's almost like they said, "Oh, he's busy cheating us." Like their heads just dropped, and then the All Blacks destroyed us because we were competitive up until that stage.
Missed tackles. I want to get back to that because we know Jesse is sort of the vanguard of the blitz defense. He's the one who shoots up, and he often misses tackles, and that's acceptable because he does interrupt or slow down or whatever. That's the point. You don't always have to make those tackles. You just have to disrupt them. But the other aspect of Esterhuizen coming on to 12 and Jesse moving to wing is that Damian de Allende had to go to 13. Now suddenly he has to play outside. Now he has to be that, and I don't think that worked as well either. Do you think?
No, that's exactly that. Is that he doesn't rush as accurate as Jesse, and I think what happened after that is that the cover that normally when Jesse rushes, there's always somebody there covering that gap, and that wasn't the case this weekend. Not always. Sometimes it was there, but I think the problem was that if you rush a bit slower, if your rush is not real blitz, you will leave gaps and you won't have time to recover because, I think that it's a combination of things. Is the defense and the changes, the guys were not focused enough. It's probably the best way to put it. Like I said earlier, it seemed, and it doesn't mean they did that. I'm not saying they did go through the motions, but they gave the appearance of just going through the motions. And and then obviously, if they're not focused enough, they're going to misread. A misread on defense then could be catastrophic.
Right, so let's move on to this week's team announced on a Monday, not the Thursday like last time. So typical Rassie did the same thing last year, after before the Wellington test after losing at Eden Park. So just give your impressions of the team in general. What do you see? I mean, he said 3 of those 6 changes, 3 of them injury enforced. And talk to me about the team in general. We'll get into the details just now.
Okay, so Cheslin wasn't a hamstring. It now turns out to be a hamstring and an ankle. He's got a swollen ankle. But we saw he limped. The way he limped, it was obvious it wasn't a hamstring. Rassie says there might be a change that I think he's just playing mind games. I don't think Cheslin will play this week. Then he's got Sia, who is bracketed with Paul de Villiers, and he's giving Sia. Again, if it's a hamstring, I'm so hesitant. If he still had a niggle by Sunday, then he shouldn't play. He said, I must train yesterday or Monday. So who knows? Maybe today you will hear that he's gone, or maybe he's not. Maybe we hear that on Friday. So that's Sia, and then obviously it's come off with Grant Williams is now injured. Kobus starts, but I think. I would have started with Kobus and Pollard in any event. I would have started with them last week already because if you must win, then you don't throw an out of form player in there hoping he'll regain his form in one match. And we've now seen Sasha, and again, I want to, and I'll say this ad nauseum. I'm not saying Sasha is a bad player. He's extremely talented. Extremely talented. He is a really good player, but I think Sasha has lost form. Has he bought into this hype that was created around him in Cape Town? You know, I mean, he was called, I can't even remember what John Dobson called him. You know, it's like he named him some high-profile soccer player that's got all this hype around. No, it was an English player, but yeah. But the reality is, there is a lot of hype. Then he was made Stormers captain, and soon after that, he lost his form. And he has his great moments, like we saw this past Saturday with that chip and collect. He can do that. We know he can do that. But he hasn't got the form. He hasn't got the focus. To me, it's almost like he bought into this hype. So somebody, I don't know what the English, rein him in. I'll use the English word, reining in. En Afrikaans sê hy moet nie weggeruk word. So you got to rein him in and say to him, listen, focus on your core job. You know, you're the playmaker, but you don't have to do everything yourself. But that's another problem, is that Sasha seems to be doing things not for himself, but by himself. I know I've seen people say he's doing it for himself. I think he's doing it by himself. He must learn that he's got 14 other teammates on the field. He must use them. You know, I mean, Damien Allen's not a bad player. Jesse Creel's not a bad player. You know, so, and he's got great wings. So yeah, I think that's one of the main problems. So Sasha on the bench, that surprises me. I would have had Mani, but Rassie says because it's going to be a wet game, because it's going to rain on Saturday, he wants Sasha there. So I'm not sure Sasha is a better wet ball player or a wet game player than Mani, but we'll see. You know, maybe Sasha comes good on Saturday, wins the game fast as one of these brilliant moments, and then we all sing his praises again.
I was about to ask you, why is Mani not on the bench? I mean, Mani didn't do anything wrong. He just came on a couple of minutes towards the end there. Is he also maybe carrying an eagle somewhere? Because, you know, I would have thought he would be a shoo-in. I'm just worried, like you said, the fact that Colby isn't playing probably contributed to the fact that Pollard is starting, because who's going to do the goal kicking now? And Sasha didn't have the greatest game, and Mani is not always the most reliable place kicker. Don't shoot me, people. Again, that's just a proven fact. He has improved. I know he has, but I mean, still in a game. This is a must-win game, like you said. You lose this game, you can't win the series anymore. So much at stake here, and the Springboks are a little on the back foot, I would think. Don't you think? Don't you agree with me?
Oh, very much so. No, very much so. This is a must-win because if the Springboks lose on Saturday, they can't win the series anymore. So they have to win on Saturday. It's a must-win. It's a final. You know, from here on, they have to win every game. Or they have to win at least 2 games to share the series, but they have to win every game from here on if they want to win the series. So yeah, no, it's definitely a must-win. So it's going to be a typical Bok game rugby. I think it's going to be more attritional than it was last week, to be quite honest. But to get back to Mani, Rassie said it's because it's going to be a wet game. So he doesn't. Again, you know, is Sasha the answer? Maybe he comes off on Saturday, and then we'll, like I said, then we'll sing his praises again.
Remember the semi-final against England? Mani was taken off after 30 minutes in a wet game. Maybe that's what Rassie was thinking about.
Exactly that, yeah. And he knew that next week was going to be just as wet, so he didn't want to risk Mani.
Maybe there's something that.
Look, I mean, yeah, Mani has his issues, but who knows? You know, we'll see on Saturday. On Saturday night, if the Springboks win, then everybody will praise Rassie for being a genius again.
You mentioned Siya Kolisi now. I want to talk about that quickly. And I know, for example, look at Ardie Savea, how important that guy is to the New Zealand effort. I mean, they bent over backwards to allow him to be able to play and be rested and everything else. And I think Siya is pretty much the same kind of player. You know, the player that you want in that field, the guy that's through sheer presence has an influence on the game, on the referee and everybody else. And I think this weekend we missed his presence. Not so much maybe his style of play or whatever, but just his personality, talking to the referee and getting the troops, you know, calmed down and, you know, united behind him kind of a thing. Nothing to do with Pieter-Steph not being a good captain or anything. He is a good captain, but I think he's too quiet a captain. And we heard the referee speaking to many players, listen, you've got a captain. I can't speak to every one of you. Jesse also went there. Jesse also an ex-captain, or, you know, he's been a captain before. I think we need Siya back. That's probably why Rassie is doing his utmost just to get him into the team, even penciling in, saying slash this and slash that. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, no, it's very, very much so. Look, Sia has grown into the captaincy, and it now fits him like a glove. I want to take you back to 1995, or even before that, 94, but certainly 95, when Kitch Christie didn't select Tiaan Strauss because Francois Pienaar was his captain. That doesn't mean Tiaan was not a better player, but Francois was the guy was gonna carry that. He's got the personality as a captain, and that's exactly what Sia's got. People will say, "Oh, but maybe he's not the best flank." Yes, Paul de Villiers has got better form than Sia at the moment, by some distance. But you're correct in saying that Sia's presence on the field, that authority that he carries with him, and being able to tap into the other leaders in the team. And I think for Pieter-Steph, maybe it's a bit new because he likes to just go do his own thing, and he just wants to play and beat up everybody by himself. A bit like Sasha, he's not doing it for himself, but he's doing it by himself. And Pieter-Steph needs to learn, like Sia also had in the beginning, need to learn to tap into the other players. And Sia admitted it, that in the beginning he didn't know what to do and what to say, and he just asked the player next to him, "You speak now," so that he can learn. But now he's grown into that role. So you're correct in saying that his presence on the field is vital for this team, especially in a must-win game like this. So yeah, Rassie mentioned something which was weird to me, that his value at the attacking rucks. Yes, I mean that means he cleans up the ball, he supports the ball carrier, or he gets rid of the defenders, that sort of stuff. I think more Sia's value is out in the wider channels, because he's got a decent turn of pace, and he's also physical. So that's where I see better value. But Rassie's mentioned that his value at attacking rucks. So cleaning up the defenders and stuff, and keeping the defenders out so that we can get faster ball. But by and large, I think you're correct that it's more his presence on the field and his ability to get the best out of his teammates and tap into his other teammates. Jesse can go to him, or he'll go to Jesse and say, "Listen, what are we doing?" Or Andre Pollard, "What do we do now?" Or somebody will come to him and say, "Sia, go speak to the referee about this." And then Sia has that presence, and he's calm enough. Unlike Pieter-Steph, which the longer the game goes on, the more angrier he looks. So if you get this angry, red-faced, 6-foot giant coming at you, you're just about to wet yourself, and that's just Peter. That doesn't make him a bad person. It doesn't. That's just the way he plays the game. He plays it 100% with his heart, because he bleeds for this country. But as a captain, you need that calmness and personality that Sia's got.
Yeah, talk to me about the burden of captaincy, because you just mentioned Sasha after being made captain of the Stormers, and I was against that. You saw his form dip a bit, and even Pieter-Steph, I don't think was in his best form that we've ever seen him. I wonder if that burden isn't too much for some players. Not that they can't do it, but it becomes an additional thing that detracts from their actual performance.
It's not that is too much for them. I think it distracts their focus. So Pieter-Steph would focus on certain things, like his defense, making 28 tackles in a World Cup final, because all he had to worry is win lineouts, clean the rucks, carry the ball, and tackle people. He didn't have to worry about making any decisions. Now suddenly he has to make decisions. So in the game, something happens, and now he's going to suddenly, and I think it distracts some players. And other players grow with that and learn. So see how, again, I'll come back to this. He's admitted it on more than one occasion that in his first couple of games, he just asked the players around him. He didn't know I wouldn't say he didn't know what he was doing, but in certain situations, he didn't know what to do. And he asked some of the more senior players. And that's how he learns. He's a really good captain is one who grows and learns. And I think that's the value of Sia. And that's something that Peter still has to do. Pieter-Steph still has to do, is learn and mature into a captaincy role. Doesn't make him a bad captain. He can be a great captain. I think he's got that authority as a physical dominant figure, but he needs to grow and mature in the captaincy role.
Talking about Pieter-Steph du Toit, and for me the player of the match for the All Blacks, and probably of the entire match, Jordie Barrett. And when you mentioned the World Cup final, I remember that Jordie Barrett couldn't, move an inch, and Pieter-Steph was all over him. How are they going to counter Jordie Barrett? Because he was absolutely brilliant on the day.
Yeah, no, you're right. He was the player of the match. Apart from Jasper Wiese, who I thought was rather unfortunate not to get man of the match, because he was also a monster. He was the one Springbok that stood out in the losing cause. Even right at the end, he carried on and on and on. A bit like a Pieter-Steph type thing, just not as many tackles. So I think how you keep him quiet is make sure that your ball carrier has got support and put pressure on him. Rush at him all the time. And what we have to learn is watch what the All Blacks are doing. So if you I want to go to something like the Peter Grant after the Grant kick, the grabber chip kicker or the kicker that was charged down. That guy was past the last player's feet, but the referee allowed him to do that. So he already stolen half a yard, and the referee kept allowing them to do that all the time. So we should have said, hold on a second, they're doing that. No, we do that. Somebody, Pieter-Steph, needed to go to the referee and say to him, listen, are they really behind the last man's feet? And then go stand, do exactly what they do. Be tight on the line. And then you force the referee's hand. So, yeah, I think that was the one thing, is that we got to learn and see. Again, you come back to Jordie Barrett. You have to understand what the referee is doing, read it in the game, which we didn't do, and then adjust yourself in the game. But earlier, it doesn't help you wait till the 70th minute and then say, oh, okay, the ref has been allowing this for 70 minutes. Maybe we should try it. No, after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if you realize they're doing certain things, go do it. Go do it. Force the referee's hand. Either he has to make a call and stop both teams, or now he has to allow both teams to do that.
How do you select a 39-year-old flanker as your backup hooker? I know that's his kind of position, but what does it say about our depth at hooker? I mean, why not Johan Grobler, for argument's sake? I mean, if you wanted to really get I'm worried about that. I mean, I love Deon Fourie, make no mistake. I think also he's a very good leader figure. I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's in the team. But something is not lacquer there. I mean, there are better hookers, not people, not players, to be on your bench, don't you think?
Yeah, as a number two, as a player who plays in the middle of the front row, I think they are better. But I think I did an article which is up on the website now about his warrior spirit. So if you have doubts, so my question to you is, if you have doubt about his selection, yes, it raised eyebrows. I was surprised. But then when I sat down back and I analyzed the entire bench, then I realized his warrior spirit. So he can play hooker, or you can use him as a loose forward. If you want him to be, if you think Malcolm Marx can go with a full 80, so suddenly you got 3 loose forwards on the bench. So, that frees you up to do. I mean, imagine you've got Cameron, Deon Fourie, and then you've got...
Mark's still on, Jasper Wiese there.
Esterhuizen can come back on as a loose forward as well. So suddenly you can get 4 tight forwards and 3 loose forwards. You can rush onto the bench, the Malcolm Marx will underplay. So imagine that's why that bench for me. So to get back to your point, yes, it raised eyebrows. But once I sat down and I analyzed it, and I thought to myself, hold on a second, this is Rassie's best bench that I've seen this entire year. Not because it's all just muscle. It's cleverly thought out, because again, under Esterhuizen, if something happens in the back line, he can go cover that. But now Rassie has got extra loose forward cover. If Malcolm Marx is not injured and he can carry on for 80 minutes, by the 50, 60 minutes, you put Deon Fourie, because he's going to be at the breakdown. When they want to open the game up in that last 20 minutes, he's going to be there. He's going to harass them. And that's what we need. So I'll come back to why I think it's a good call. It's because of his warrior spirit. We saw that in the World Cup final when he played 77 minutes at hooker. We've seen it for the Stormers and that opening match of the tour. We again saw. So I think based on that, Deon is definitely a good choice. Not as a front row forward, but as a player per se.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree with you. Okay, now, just in closing, big pressure. Do you think the Springboks have it? Do you think this team can do it? Are the All Blacks not being, better at it than we are at the moment, out coaching us a little bit? being. I mean, last week a lot of the noise was about the referee and what the referee must look for and everything else. And I think the All Blacks won that battle. Getting into the referee's head. With all the noise and stuff that the Springboks made around it, Jaco Peyper being trotted out and, Felix Jones being trotted out. And the All Blacks got the upper hand in that sense. Like you just said, with in the referee's head, the seeds that were planted in his head. I'm a little worried about being out-psyched here, on our own back in our own backyard kind of a thing. Do you think we can pull it off?
Simple question. Yes, the Springboks can win. How are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? Those are two very different things. So I think the selection, to me, the entire selection process tells me that Rassie has taken certain lessons to heart, and by him saying that I look at myself and I made the wrong calls, that means he has looked in the mirror, and not in a bad way. People mustn't think when the players and the coaches say we must look in the mirror, what that means is that you go and look, what did you do wrong? And don't repeat the same mistakes. We know that old saying is the expression of or the thing of idiocy is doing the same thing over and over and is expecting a different result.
Yeah, true.
So I think Rassie has already indicated that the Springboks will present a different picture of it as a team and as tactics, in terms of tactics this week. So yeah, they can win. That's a short answer. The question is, will they, and will they be more focused? To me, that's, more clinical and more focused. I think those are the two key things for me that I want to see different this coming Saturday. Because for 50 minutes, we were all over them. I mean, by the end of the game, we still had 60% possession and 60% territory. That means we were doing something right. We just didn't, again, we'll come back to what we said right at the beginning. 11-22 entries, we only converted one. That to me, that says it all. So
lost right there. Yeah. I'm with you. Okay, Jan, quick prediction.
I'm going to stick to what I said last week. I was horribly wrong last week. I said the Springboks to win by a single score. Not only did the Springboks not win, but it wasn't by a single score. They scored almost double the points.
More than
double the points that the Springboks did. So I'm going to stick to that. I think it will be another tight game. But I think this time the Springboks will last a bit longer. I think the heads won't drop. So, yeah, I think it's, I would say 5 to 8 points, but most likely a single score at the end.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think we can pull it off. I'm just worried about the rain, apparently. It's quite hot at the moment. You just mentioned it, but it looks like it's going to be raining. Then you want a guy like Pollard on the field. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. It's been fun as always, and back to normal. So from this week on. Oh, by the way, on Sunday, Jan and I and Harry and Ari planning to do another one of those, super crossover episodes where we talk about next week's game. I mean, hopefully the Springboks win the second test, and it's all to play for in the third one. We'll see. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Jan. Have a good one.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.